I will ask you to present yourself because you have a nice biography, please.
Oh. Well, thank you, Vincent. So my name is Alec Ross, and my background actually started as a school teacher. I was an inner city school teacher in a very poor community in the United States. And what drew me to technology was that even in this very, very, very poor community, I recognized that all of the young people had these skills with technology. They just got it immediately. It did not matter that they were poor. And so I thought that this could be an asset, something that we could build on to help people become more economically viable. And so I started an NGO, started it in a basement with 2 friends, and we didn't have €2. We had no money. But over the course of the 8 years that I was at this nonprofit, helping to connect poor people to the internet and to educational content on the internet, we grew to become the world's largest technology-focused nonprofit with programs in about 15 countries. And then towards the end of that, I helped lead technology, media, and telecommunications policy for Barack Obama's presidential campaign. And from that, then came into the Obama administration, where now I have a new job, a job that didn't exist before, where I work for Hillary Clinton and where I serve as her senior advisor for innovation. And as a senior advisor for innovation, my job is to figure out how we can modernize our statecraft, how we can maximize the use of technology and innovation in service of our diplomatic and development goals. So what I really wanted to do was speak not long, because I know that there are some questions that Vincent wanted to pose and that I thought would be interesting to hear coming from the audience. But what I really wanted to talk about was the progression that we made from what became relatively well known in terms of use of technology during the Obama campaign into the Obama administration. During the Obama campaign, I think it's fairly well known that Barack Obama demonstrated an enormous amount of leadership in terms of the use of technology, telecommunications, and social media. And it's really interesting. One of the things that he did is he empowered a group of individuals who normally wouldn't have necessarily been powerful in an American presidential campaign, young people. And, you know, it's interesting. There are people like Joe Rosebars, Macon Phillips, Chris Hughes, Stephen Gear, Michael Slaby, Dan Soroker. All of these people worked for this campaign, and they are, in my and Vincent's world, they're sort of rock stars of social media. And some are in government, but more are entrepreneurs running big businesses. But for one brief moment in time, they were all focused on the cause that was Barack Obama's presidential campaign. And the reason why I personally believe that Obama was very successful using technology in the campaign was not that he built a website or not that he built an iPhone app, but rather what he did is he developed tools, the purpose of which was to create online behavior, which drove offline behavior. So he didn't say, this is the web, this is the internet, there's no connection to real life other than voting. What it did is it fused the two. So if you look at this slide, for example, right up in the middle, even though this is the web, what it's trying to get people to do is make phone calls. And the system that was built was incredibly sophisticated, so that people would only make phone calls on Barack Obama's behalf if there was some affinity, if there were ties that could be recognized between them. So it integrated the human into the digital. There's also something there, the National Voter Protection Center. So a real issue in elections is, at least historically in American elections, is the degree to which there is or is not integrity in voting. So many of you will remember in 2000, when George Bush ran against Al Gore, there were these huge controversies about the vote in Florida. And so here, one of the things that was being pushed off of the web page were the things that could be done to protect people so that their vote counted. And if you look at this, a lot of what this does is it's not an online campaign so much as it is a digitization of those things that historically otherwise would already be happening in campaign. But by using 21st century tools, they became far more efficient. And this is something that you all probably know. Barack Obama's use of technology during the campaign was famous, and it was part of the reason why he was elected president. And one of the things that he committed to do coming into office was to continue to use these tools in the context of governance. So one of the first things he did was very, very low tech. He wanted to figure out how we could communicate with people in Iran. You know, ever since the Ayatollah Khomeini came in power in the 1970s, ever since the 1970s when the Ayatollah Khomeini came in power in Iran, we have had and we continue to have very challenged, frankly, very bad relationships with the Iranian government, dating back as recently as last week. It's a part of every week these days. And one of the things that we recognized, though, was all of the lack of progress that we had been making in terms of our communication was all between government. And so one of the questions we asked ourselves is there any way to connect to the Iranian people themselves, to have a dialogue with citizens? Because I think it's oftentimes the case that where governments are unreasonable, their people are reasonable. And in fact, sometimes governments aren't necessarily the best face to put forward for any given country. And so one thing that we did is we took a video camera into the Oval Office, and the president gave a message to the Persian-speaking people of the world for Nowruz, the Iranian New Year, or the Persian New Year. And, you know, it was an experiment. You know, we didn't know the degree to which it was or wasn't going to work. We said, let's try it. Let's see what happens. And lo and behold, 60,000 Iranian blogs picked it up. And it became this extraordinary tool for communication and for engagement in Iran, where for a lot of people, for the first time since the 1970s, they got some exposure to Americans other than what their government was saying. And so this spirit of experimentation, I think, is very important because in connection technologies, and when I say connection technologies, I mean technologies that connect people to information and to each other. So it's social media, it's mobile, it's web, it's all of this. In connection technologies, particularly in political spaces, there oftentimes are no certainties. Things are being done for the first time. So anybody who claims omniscience, anybody who claims to know exactly what's going to happen is probably wrong. So the spirit of experimentation is very important in connection technology spaces, but measured experimentation. So like this woman being very careful, not a crazy scientist. So it's taking risks, but it's taking measured risks. To what end? Why are we doing this? One of the things that if you talk to people in France, if you talk to people around Europe, if you talk to people all around the world, and if you ask them how they felt about America's foreign policy over the past 10 years, many people would say overpowering. You're constantly trying to overpower everybody. You're constantly trying to overpower everything. You're constantly trying to get your way in a way that just uses girth and power. And whether somebody wants it or not, you're going to smash your way through. And the style of Barack Obama and of Hillary Clinton is to say, how can we go from overpowering to empowering? How can we take our diplomacy and development and reboot it So if you think about your computer, you know, every now and then your computer's got like 14 things running, it's slow, it's a mess, something's frozen, and every now and then you need to just reboot your computer. You know, I would argue that over the last couple years it's become necessary to reboot America's foreign policy and to produce some change. And change rooted in moving from a foreign policy that is based on overpowering to one that's based on empowering. And what's interesting about this moment in time, what's new and what's changed is the ubiquity of these connection technologies. So just as long as I've been in government, I came into government with the new administration. And my first day of work was April 11th, 2009. So literally less than a year and a half ago. On my first day of work, there were 4.1 billion mobile handsets on the planet. Today, less than a year and a half later, there are 5 billion mobile handsets. So just in the time that I've been at work, April of last year to September of this year, from 4.1 billion to 5 billion, a nearly 20% increase. And of that, about 75% of those handsets are in the developing world. So places that historically were non-digital, Africa, some places in South America, some places in South Central Asia, it's oftentimes the case now that things are totally and completely connected, totally and completely digital. And so what this then presents as an opportunity as this infrastructure, as this connectivity becomes ubiquitous, what it's like handing a politician, it's like handing, in this case, a Secretary of State, a brand new toolbox, saying here are tools that weren't available before, but they're available now. And some of what we've been doing at Hillary Clinton's State Department is pretty interesting. I'll give 2 examples from Haiti. So one thing that Hillary Clinton asked me to do was to put together a dinner for her. She has been very smart, and she's noticed all of the disruption, the positive disruption as well as the negative disruption that's taken place because of technology becoming so pervasive. And so what she did, she said, you know, Alec, will you put together a dinner that I'll host of about 12 of your friends? You know, we'll close the doors, it'll be off the record, and we'll have a free-spirited conversation about the intersection of technology and foreign policy. And there were some big names. There were people like, you know, Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, and Jack Dorsey, the founder and chairman of Twitter. But some of the other people who I brought were, they ran smaller companies. I said, you know, it would be really interesting for the Secretary of State to spend time with some people in their 20s and 30s who have a couple dozen rather than a couple thousand employees. And one of the people at that dinner had pioneered a technology that allowed people to make charitable donations over their mobile phones through SMS. 1 week after this dinner was the earthquake in Haiti. And when the earthquake hit, it was sort of mid-late afternoon, early evening in the United States, and the secretary was on her way from Hawaii to Papua New Guinea. And we wanted to figure out a way so that the next morning when people were having their café noisette for the first time, we wanted it to be possible for people to do something right there and right then, for individuals, for citizens to help. And so at the secretary's direction, one of the things that we did is we contacted this guy who she had dinner with the week before, and within a couple hours we set up a system so that people could text the word Haiti to a short code 90999. And within 3 weeks, more than 3 million Americans had donated more than $30 million. So literally more than $30 million was raised $10 at a time. That's just one little example of what we've done. We've also used technology as a way of innovating against people who threaten our security. I don't know how much attention has reached France, but in the United States, it's a really big deal, the degree to which narco-traffickers, drug dealers in Mexico are fueling an almost unprecedented crime wave. So one of the things that we're doing in eDiplomacy is we're taking problems that we're having a very hard time solving and bringing innovators, bringing people who are historically not from government, and getting them involved as diplomats for a period of time to help create solutions that otherwise aren't coming. So in the case of drug-fueled violence in Mexico, ever since Mexican President Calderon announced his crackdown in December of 2006, the slope on the graph of the violence there was just sort of went straight up. More and more violence, more and more violence, more and more violence. And even if we as the United States invested a lot of money in it. So one example of eDiplomacy, one example of what we call 21st century statecraft was we put together a team of about 10 people who were innovators, who were entrepreneurs. We took them down to Mexico and gave them the challenge of figuring out how technology can be used as a tool to fight against these cartels. And one of the things that we learned while we were down there was that one of the reasons there was so much violence is that people would not report crime anymore, because they were fearful that if they did report crime, the police were corrupt and there would be retribution. If you walk up the steps of the police station, a cartel member is going to shoot you in the head. And so one of the things that we learned is that even in the lowest income barrios in the poorest cities, everybody has a cell phone and everybody has SMS and everybody has access to the web. So what we did is we built a system that will allow people to anonymously report crime and then map what's happening so that there is anonymity, transparency, and accountability in crime fighting where there wasn't before. We can also see the impact of connection technologies in oppressive societies. So one story you all may have encountered here was the murder of a woman named Nada Aga Sultan. And what's interesting was Nida Aga Sultan going from a woman who was otherwise unknown into becoming a symbol of resistance. And the interesting story about Nida is that because in Iran everybody has video-enabled mobile handsets, people literally videotaped her murder by the Basi militia. And as it happened, it was emailed out by people from their cell phones in Tehran to Iranians, we think, in the diaspora, who in turn gave it to the BBC and to CNN. And this then became the global symbol of resistance. Nida's death became the symbol of the Green Movement. And so the last example I would give you sort of the disruption caused by technology in foreign policy spaces is that it no longer takes traditional media to make something news, but rather anybody with a mobile handset that can take video suddenly can do primary reporting in ways that weren't previously possible. So all of this is a way of saying that the world is not changing, the world has changed. It's completely disrupted business, it's disrupting academia, and it's disrupting foreign policy as well. And so what we're trying to do in the Obama administration is not necessarily say that this is all good or that it's bad, but that it's inevitable. And if the rising power of technology is inevitable, then we're trying to figure out how to harness it in ways that can be empowering as opposed to overpowering. So thank you very much.